In this video tutorial, we are going to be looking at finding a story's theme, more specifically finding the theme in Doris Lessing's short story Through the Tunnel, and just letting you know that this might go longer than one part, so we might not find the exact theme in the story by the end of this tutorial. We'll see how far we get, and there might be a part two. So, how to find a story's theme. This is following along or following up with our lesson objective. This has been our objective over the last couple of weeks, that we are trying to analyze the themes of identity, self-discovery, perseverance in Doris Lessing's short story Through the Tunnel. And that is what we are going to be looking at doing more of today. So finding the story's theme helps us understand a story more fully. When we read for school or we read to analyze, it is a different kind of reading. It's a closer reading. It is a annotated reading. Whereas if we just read a story for pleasure, if I pick up a book and read a story, or I pick up a magazine and read a story, or I read an online story and I don't need to analyze it, or, read the story for a class or something, I don't read it the same way that we are doing the reading of Doris Lessing's Through the Tunnel in class. So understand that. We might mentally be doing annotating when we're reading for pleasure, but not to the extent that we're doing this today. So let's look at some guidelines for discovering theme. Theme is one of the most difficult concepts, I'm going to say not just in school, but even as an adult, trying to uncover theme is one of the most difficult parts of reading. And I would say for sure, based on star reading results, based on different formative assessments and summative assessments that I've done over the years while I've been teaching, uncovering theme is, I would put it in the top 3 most difficult things to do when studying literature. All right, so looking at guidelines, we need to know that the theme of a work, and when we're talking about work, in this case, we're talking about the short story, it's not the same as its subject. And I'm going to just say I've seen even English teachers mistakenly talk about subject when they're supposed to be discussing theme. So understand that the theme of work is not the same as its subject. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. The subject is just the topic that's being discussed. So the overall story or poem or what have you would be, peace, love, war, friendship, perseverance, childhood, I don't know. It could be so many things. Hopefully you figure out what I mean here. So when we talk about what Jerry goes through in the story Through the Tunnel, we know that he goes through these physical challenges. And we know those challenges show the reader emotional and psychological growth. We know he has this desire for autonomy, to be more independent. We know the local boys, as well as his mother, and even nature, the ocean, leave him sometimes with feelings of emptiness, loneliness, isolation. But we aren't going to say that the theme is isolation, because that is more like what the topic is, or the subject is, one of the many subjects and topics. And then he also goes through this having to balance these scenes where he's being fearful, and then he's balancing that fearfulness with being courageous. And we definitely see him pushed beyond his comfort zone a few times. So there's this universal experience that's at play in these personal trials that Jerry goes through. And we can transfer that to real life by saying, yeah, there are personal trials that come along with growing up, from going from being a child to being a young adult and then, a more mature adult eventually. So that's kind of the universal theme, if you will, or universal experience that we can identify with. So I'm going to just show you in this kind of 4-square graphic organizer. You did something similar to this in the very first assignment. It was a Nearpod assignment, and there was a vocabulary video in uncovering theme. And you were asked to fill out this 4-square graphic organizer about that video, Pip the dog. If you remember, he was a seeing eye dog, and he was small for his I was going to say small for his size. That doesn't make sense. He was a bit on the small side, and so he kind of had overcome that, concern with being too small for the job. Anywho, you're going to do kind of the same idea here, but with this story. So we know that the characters, mainly there's 3 of them. I guess I could add here, now that I'm thinking of it. I guess the older boys are characters too in the story. So we've got Jerry, an 11-year-old boy. We've got Jerry's mother, who we know is a young widow. We've got these older boys who are not of the same language and culture as Jerry is. We're never quite sure if they are French boys or not. It doesn't say that. We see Jerry assumes they might be French because he starts speaking French to them, saying bonjour, bonjour, merci, merci, or no, not merci, monsieur, monsieur. Anyway, so we've got these older boys of some other foreign descent. And then we've got the setting as character. And you may not have studied literature before where you consider the setting as a character. And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I just want you to at least get the surface idea that the ocean as a setting can be thought of as sort of a character in this story. Then we've got the plot, and that's just what happens in the story, not the theme. So I just want to separate that out again. And I'm trying to show you visually how that's not the theme. The plot is what happens in the story. That Jerry is on this beach vacation with his mother. He gets bored with being on this safe beach, this beach that kind of represents more of a childish thing to him, right? He's getting tired of that. He's growing out of wanting to stay on the safe beach. So he ventures away from his mother to, I have in quotes, the wild looking place, because that's actually, taken directly from the text, where he becomes obsessed with wanting to prove himself. At first, he kind of wants to prove it to these older boys, but then he actually wants to prove to himself that he can swim through or conquer this dangerous underwater tunnel. And he has to use some self-control. He has to go through some rigorous training, but he does persevere, and he manages to swim through the tunnel and proves to himself that he's leaving childhood behind. So that's the main plot of the story, right? That's what happens in the story. I always kind of struggle between plot and summary. And now that I'm thinking of it, I wonder if that was more of a summary. But we're just going to go with that for now, because we're not really studying plot right now. We're studying theme. Here, I put main idea, and then I also added subject, because in that slide where it says the subject is merely the topic being discussed, and it's usually mentioned in one word. So you could say that one of the subjects of this story is coming of age. You could say one of the subjects of this story is perseverance. Coming of age, you might also hear referred to as Bildungsroman, but again, I don't want to get off on that topic right now. So those are the subjects, not theme. Could we find theme through studying subject? Yes, but you're not going to just say the theme is one word or even 2 words. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You're going to hear me say that a bunch of times. So we got this main idea. So the main idea is that there's this 11-year-old boy. He's struggling to achieve independence from his mother and prove to himself that he is leaving childhood behind. Again, that is not the theme. It's just the main idea going on in this story. So theme is blank. We're going to keep trying to uncover what the theme is in this story. So how do we find a story's theme? One way to do it, one of the first steps, is to ask ourselves, does the main character change as a result of his or her experiences? So taking this story into effect, does Jerry change as a result of his experiences in this story? If he does, how? How do we see him change, and why? Why do we see him change? Or why does he change as a result of these experiences? What causes the change? In your student guide, I gave you what looks like this. This is the slide that you have with one of these guiding questions. How do Jerry's character traits and behavior change throughout the story? And then I gave you some citations for that. What I did for this video tutorial is I took that same slide and I just duplicated it and just kind of made a table out of the slide that I gave you. So I made a table out of it so that I can kind of show how he behaves at the beginning and what traits he has, and then how those start changing, and then what ends up happening at the end. Now, you could do this with several aspects of this story. I just chose to, for the sake of these examples, show you one aspect of the story in how he changes from beginning to middle to end. All right, so we see at the beginning of the story, we see Jerry that he is close to his mom. He's trailing her, and they're at this beach where they visited before. And you're going to need to go back to the story to be able to like pull out some of the things that you're going to see me pulling out from the story. So in this first paragraph of the story, going to the shore on the first morning of the vacation, the young English boy stopped at a turning of the path and looked down at a wild and rocky bay. So we already in the very first line see him looking down at this wild and rocky bay. And they refer to it as this wild place a few times in the story. So he's looking kind of at both things. He's looking at the rocky bay and then over to the crowded beach that he knows so well. The one he's familiar with, the bay he's not familiar with. And he's walking with his mother in front of him and following her. She even remarks, "Oh, there you are, Jerry," because she felt that he was not with her. So she wants to make sure he's following close behind, right? Still being treated as a child, right? But she does ask him, "Would you rather not come with me? Would you rather?" So she is giving him this opening to maybe not do what they've always done, which is have him go to this safe beach without her. So what I did is I took this line, contrition sent him running after her, and yet as he ran, he looked back over his shoulder at the wild bay. There's that wild bay phrase coming up again. And all morning, as he played on the safe beach, he was thinking of it. So I took that and I put it onto my table here. And I cited it because me saying the story opens with Jerry close to, trailing his mother at the beach. They have visited many times before. I'm going to show my evidence of that with actual text from the story. Contrition sent him running after her, and yet as he ran, he looked back over his shoulder at the wild bay, and all morning as he played on the safe beach, he was thinking of it. So we see him trailing his mother, but now he is noticing the wild bay and feeling drawn to it. We kind of see him feeling drawn to it by where it says, I'm just going to make my font a little bit smaller here so that I can fit it all. And that's still not small enough. All right. And then I have my text evidence here that he is feeling contrite, running after his mom, but Also looking back over his shoulder at this bay, even when he's playing on the safe beach that he's used to, he's still thinking about this new wild bay and feeling drawn to it. And then I said that the next morning, in lines 26 and 27, we get a glimpse of Jerry beginning to pull away from his mother and exert his independence. We see he is considering the possibility he can be comfortable being alone and his mother can be by herself away from him. It's a very good sign that he is maturing. And then I've got the evidence to support that from the text. And it says, and he almost ran after her again, feeling it unbearable that she should go by herself. But he did not. He did not run after her this time. So even in the beginning of the story, we're starting to see these glimpses of Jerry's character traits and behavior changes. All right. So then as we get into the story, is it technically the middle of the story? No, probably not. I don't know. But not at the very beginning of the story anyway. We see that part of the transition from childhood to adulthood, and I'm taking this from my own experiences, part of the transition from a childhood to adulthood is experiencing struggles of one kind or another. One of the struggles for Jerry is when the older boys are not impressed with his clowning around. And I have that evidenced by lines 81 through 83. And now, in a panic of failure, he yelled up in English, "Look at me, look!" And he began slashing and kicking in the water like a foolish dog. They looked down gravely, frowning. We know they are not impressed by him. So he's got this comparison here of still wanting to do what has worked for him as a child, which is, acting silly. And we're seeing that not working for him now. So that's kind of put him at a disadvantage in this situation with these older boys. And then we also see through his hot shame, so he's feeling ashamed in front of these boys. Through his hot shame, feeling the pleading grin on his face like a scar that he could never remove. Pleading grin. He's pleading with the boys through this silly grin, right? Please help me belong with your group. He looked up at the group of big brown boys on the rock and shouted, "Bonjour, merci." Oh, he does say merci. "Merci, au revoir, monsieur, monsieur." Well, that didn't work. There we go. While he hooked his fingers round his ears and waggled them. And that is in lines 86 through 89 of the story. I do want to point out that if the only text that you are referring to in a piece of writing is just one piece of text, in this case, we're only talking about the story through the tunnel. So I can just refer in my in-text citation to the lines from the story because I'm only discussing one story from one author. But once we start adding other texts, then we would have to add the author so that the reader can know what to refer to and what we're referring to. And then I did add this, but I'll probably take it out of here. Another thing we could explore are Jerry's physical traits. So I just want you to know that the table that I'm going through right now is mainly showing one aspect of the story, but you could also start another table showing Jerry's physical capabilities changing. But I do kind of allude to that in this end column. So let's see what we come up with here. All right, so toward the end of the story, we see that Jerry is able to hold his breath underwater. So I guess these are physical capabilities, if you wanted to kind of, add that to that column. I don't know. There are different ways of doing this. Anywho, so we see Jerry able to hold his breath underwater for long periods of time. And I referenced the part of the text that says, oops, and I should have put quotation marks there. The words 2 minutes authorized by the clock brought close the adventure that was so necessary to him. So in lines 186 and 187, we see that he can now hold his breath for 2 minutes. He looked at the clock, 2 minutes. We know that to be 120 seconds, right? It's a rather long time to be able to hold your breath. So that's pretty cool. So we see that he's able to hold his breath for long periods of time. Let's see. He is able to withstand the underwater pressure at great depths, and I could find text evidence for that if I wanted to in the story as well. We see him able to overcome this creepy feeling of the seaweed in the tunnel. We could find that from the story. And we see him able to propel himself forward. And that could be looked at, this ability to propel himself forward. We could say that that is literally while he's in the tunnel, but also metaphorically that he's able to move forward in life, right? Being able to overcome this tunnel is also his ability to propel himself forward in the real world. And then the citation for that, he feebly clutched at rocks in the dark, pulling himself forward. And then we also see him propel himself forward and through the tunnel okay, let's see if I can say that again. He's able to withstand the underwater pressure at great depths, able to overcome the creepy feeling of the seaweed in the tunnel, and able to propel himself forward and on through the tunnel. Let's just say to emerge on the other side of it. I'm not exactly sure when I wrote that, what I was thinking. Anyway. We also see Jerry lose his desire to impress the older boys in the last line of the story, which is here. It was no longer of the least importance to go to the bay. So it was no longer important to him to go to the bay. That was the last lines of the story. And again, because this is the only story we're talking about, we can take out the author's name because we know what we're referencing here. And then I added this why. Why is it no longer of the least importance to go to the bay? Well, why? Because he's impressed himself. He impressed the person who should matter the most, himself. He no longer needs to impress those boys, right? So the bay, where those older boys are, is not the most important thing to him anymore. And the story leaves it open to find out, did he ever go back and see those boys? Maybe. Would they have been impressed? I don't know. But that's something that we just have to think about. All right. So, let's say, I guess that sort of starts to happen in the middle, that his physical capabilities start to change. So, I don't know where we want to put that in what column. But I think we have answered, at least partially, that Jerry does change as a result of his experiences in the story. And we've shown how, and we've shown why. And I think there are many other examples we could give too. We could probably make 3 or 4 of those charts or those tables. All right, so one of the other questions that we want to ask is, and this picture is in front of where I want to be. There we go. Does the main character change? We answered that. And then how does the main conflict result? And I think I'll save that for another tutorial because I'm coming up on about 24 minutes here. And that's probably about, it's probably about 10 minutes longer than most people can hold their attention for. So our attention spans, even as adults, are not much past about 15 minutes. You're going to be asked to snip a part of my video. And the part of the video that I want you to snip is this chart that says symbols in this story. I don't want a screenshot. I want a snip of the slide from the video. All right, go to it.